Welcome to the RYLACast, the official podcast of Camp RYLA, District 5810. I'm Greg Tepper, and sitting across the table from me...
Hello, Greg.
I was just going to see if you were going to fill in the gaps. This is a man they call Josey, Andrew Utz. That's a journalism trick that if you're ever interviewing someone, here's free journalism advice if you're ever doing an interview. If you're interviewing somebody and you need quotes, right? You're interviewing someone for a story. If you just shut up,
like at random times,
for example, if I say, "Hey Josey, tell me about beef," and you were just be like, "Well, blah 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 blah," go on and on and on, but then you come to a conclusion. If I just keep staring at you silently, you will want to fill in the silence. Nobody likes awkward silences, and so that's an old journalism trick, is to just be quiet, because other people will speak if you are quiet.
So on the flip side, if you had said how's beef, and I said good, who's going to break the silence? And then that's it.
I mean, we can play beef chicken if you want. This is a dumb podcast, but it's our podcast. It's the RYLACast, the official podcast, Camp RYLA, District 5810. Thank you for spending a little bit of your day with us. A little bit later in the program, we will be joined by very, I would say, understated is the word that I would describe Shelby Smith with.
Yes.
Understated, almost meek.
Yeah.
Meek.
You don't even know.
She's in a room.
Yeah. Really.
We are, of course, joking. Shelby Smith, to call her Shelby Smith, by the way, is very weird too.
It is very weird. Nothing against the other half of Smith.
Yes,
but it's weird.
It is because I've never known her as Shelby Smith. Anyway, she is our wonderful, wonderful guest coming up here in just a moment. You will not want to miss that. So power through this first segment of me talking to get to Shelby talking, which is the whole crux of that's like the point. That's what we want to
and then just stop after that.
Stop. So, Shelby was tasked with picking a word for this week's podcast, and her word was humility.
Yes. Humility.
Now you're going to be afraid.
You're doing the trick. You're doing the trick, and I'm like, you know what? I'll play your game. Greg Tepper.
Humility. I've always thought that humility and humble, that's very weird that they all, I can't think of another example of if you take a virtue and then you turn it into an adjective that it adds a B. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's always struck me as a very odd turn of grammatical things. Really, guys, I should tell you that I am a professional talker. That's what makes me so good at this.
I think you're doing great.
Thanks, man. So, humility, and I've got the first segment. I've got the big segment today, and humility, I think, is an extremely important and I think underrated virtue and value for a leader to have. I think that there is a notion, and this is something that I know gets hammered home at camp and gets hammered home throughout the course of the RYLA program, is that being a leader is not necessarily being the loudest one.
Yes, right.
And that is something that gets hammered home and hammered home and hammered home, and because I do think that people associate being a leader with being the one talking.
Right.
When that's not necessarily the way it goes. But I do think that humility, it goes hand in hand with that, in the sense that you've got to make sure, if you are ever going, I think we all agree that a true leader is not necessarily the one with all the answers, but the person who goes and gets the most answers from the people around them, right?
Right.
Who encourages people to give their answers to
speak up, and yeah.
Yes, that is the mark of a true, in my opinion, a good leader.
Using all their tools.
Correct. And so, I found an article in the it's by there's a book called Alive at Work by Dan Cable. Alive at Work by Dan Cable. But I found this this article that he wrote for the Harvard Business Review.
Oh man, I think that's like the second time you've been reading the Harvard Business Review.
I just read, I spend my days reading all sorts of sports blogs, but I also pepper in the Harvard Business Review. I'm sure the Harvard Business Review is just like a normal website or magazine.
They were interested in advertising. I guess not anymore. They were never interested.
I was going to say, if you subscribe to the Harvard Business Review, I just picture that you get your first episode or your first edition mailed to you, and then you also get a monocle mailed to you. And you're just like, you'll need this to read our magazine.
Send us a note if you subscribe to the Harvard Business Review.
Anyway, just besmirching another. As somebody who works in magazines, I should just be supporting all magazines anyway. Okay, so there's this article by Dan Cable. And he talks, the headline is How Humble Leadership Really Works. Humble or umble?
Like Texas.
Like Texas?
Ascot?
Humble?
No.
Oh, no.
Oh, no. We've gone off the rail.
RYLACast. Hold on, I got to check that.
Well, thanks, everybody, for sticking with us here.
Boom! Wildcat.
Nice.
Yes.
Okay, he saved it.
Okay. Anyway, point is, how humble leadership really works. And he writes, I'm going to paraphrase something, but I do want to quote this directly because I think that it's a very good, what we call nut graph for the nuts and bolts of it. Quote, to put it bluntly, servant leaders have the humility, courage, and insight to admit that they can benefit from the expertise of others who have less power than them. They actively seek the ideas and unique contributions of the employees that they serve. This is how servant leaders create a culture of learning and an atmosphere that encourages followers to become the very best they can, end quote. And that really struck to the core of kind of what we were talking about with humility as far as leadership is concerned, is you are going in there and admitting, saying, yes, I am in charge, right? Yes, I am the leader of the group, so to speak. And yes, I have more power than you, let's just say, in this particular group. But that doesn't mean that I have all the answers, and that doesn't mean that you have none of the answers. It means I'm the one who's responsible for gathering it all up, but we're all in this together. That is kind of, I really enjoyed that kind of lead up. So he has a couple of kind of tips and tricks for those things. One of them, he said, is to ask how you can help employees, let's say, do their own jobs better, and then listen. And that, I think, is a huge part of being a leader, is that you have got to go and empower the people around you to do the best that they can, and find ways to help them do their part. Say, okay, what can I do that will make your job a little bit easier? That, yes, it may end up being something that is, quote unquote, below my pay grade. Right?
Right.
The idea of there not being a task that you're too important for, I think, is very important as far as leadership is concerned. And then another thing he mentions is to, and I really like this, create low-risk spaces for people to think of new ideas.
Oh, that's good.
When you start thinking about stepping out of your comfort zone, right? And one of the things that I think is so valuable and so impactful about camp is, in many ways, that is a no-fail zone. Mm-hmm. In that, that's not to say that you always succeed, but what it is to say, if you fail, there is not a risk that you are a failure. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I like this idea of creating a low risk space. And I was reading I was reading a book the other day about The Office, the
show,
the acclaimed television show.
Yes.
And it was about how they wrote The Office, and they would have what they call blue sky days. And what they mean by blue sky days is that you go in, they would go into a writer's room, and they would say, there are no dumb ideas. Whatever you want to try, let's try to flesh it out. If you want Jim and Pam to go to the moon, we can try it. We can just see if we can make this work. There are no bad ideas. And to me, that is so elemental in leadership, is that if, first of all, you've got to make sure that you're not on this pedestal above everybody. Mm-hmm. But using your power, you can create these spaces where we are all in this together, and we are all on the same level, and we all have great ideas, and I want to hear your ideas. some of them might be dumb. Let's be honest.
Right.
They're going to be dumb ideas. But if you have the humility to make sure that you are down, I say down to that level, that seems so condescending. It's not true. But what I mean is that if you are saying, I am not better than you, we are all in this together, and my job as a leader is simply to bring us all together and create a place where we can all be the best that we can. Mm-hmm. That, I think, is where humility plays into it. Because if you're a boss in a corner office that says, leave me alone, you're not worth my time, that's not gonna lead to the most productive possible atmosphere.
Right.
So I like the idea of the low-risk spaces for people to think of new ideas. And, by the way, there is something to be said about being humble is just kind of self-evident in the sense that, like, I can kind of trick it up and I could say, oh, you know what? You can do this. And that's an example of being humble or this. But the bottom line is that I think we all know what being humble is. And I think we all know what humility is. And sometimes we just have to go out there and say, no, just be humble. Like, go out there and practice humility in your leadership and make sure that you're not treating people as if you're better than them just because you may have more power over them, or you may be, you may have a higher rank than them, quote unquote.
Right.
That was something that really struck me, and I really liked the thing that really struck me was, one, that nut graph, and then secondly, the low risk spaces for people to create ideas, because that's where the best ideas are going to come from. When you have when you've removed the idea that we're all going to laugh at you, or whatever failure represents. When you remove that, I think you open up an incredible amount of freedom for people to really get to the core of it. And yeah, maybe you, Josey, I'm pointing directly at you, maybe you have a bad idea, right? But I'm going to hear that idea, and it's going to spark something, a conversation that's going to bring it around to a good idea. Mm-hmm. And I think that all starts with humility and the idea of a leader not necessarily being the loudest voice in the room, but simply the person that brings everybody together. There's that.
All right, I tried.
Told you.
And,
I told you. It's very effective. Okay, so that is something to think about. Now, let's just bring the energy down a level.
Bring it on down. Bring it down now. Bring it down.
Let's bring in our very special guest, Shelby Smith. She will join us after the break. Stick with us on the RYLACast. Oh, Josey.
Oh, Greg.
I have felt like this podcast has lacked a certain energy. It's been, do you feel like you're dragging it today?
Oh, you're just calling me out.
Basically, yes.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
This is the start of an ongoing tension between the two co-hosts of this podcast.
Award-winning.
I feel like we need to up the energy here.
Yes, I agree.
Unfortunately, the only person we could find, though.
The only unfortunate.
How flattering. The only person.
Let's bring in maybe the most high-energy member of the RYLA family. Ladies and gentlemen, we are so pleased to be joined by Shelby Smith. Yay!
Hi, guys. Hello. Thank you for joining today.
And
Hi.
I called you. Hello. And I called. And we're in the studio, and people are walking by.
We're in an aquarium.
We're in an aquarium, and people are like, "Oh, what's going on in there?"
Let's just don't tap on the glass.
First of all, we called you Shelby Smith.
Yes,
which is a new thing.
It is a new thing. So I got married 8 months ago. That's
Congratulations!
Still very new. Thanks. It's weird because
maybe not the best way to lead into talking about your marriage and say it's weird, but go on.
No, so I actually talked about this one time. So marriage is so odd because it's so foreign. There's nothing that prepares you for it because you can have relationships, but there is nothing compatible or comparable to marriage. It's just this person is a leech, but the best.
Oh my god!
No, you interrupted. I didn't get to finish. It's the best kind of leech. It's a leech that has love and it's cuddly and it's nice, but then it's always there, and it's I don't know. It's life isn't about you anymore, and that's a good thing because I think that chisels us to be better humans for sure, but. Yeah, it's just definitely an adjustment, but in a good way. They're both looking at me very I've
just got to tell you that if I were on this, I'm just saying, as somebody with a wife, that I would love to be. I would love to be described as a leech.
Yes,
that sounds like. But I know what you mean.
It's in the best way.
No. I know what you mean because you are immediately, in every way,
a symbiotic relationship.
Absolutely.
In that what happens to you happens to them, and what happens to them happens to you.
Yes.
And you're exactly right. There's not a template for that. So I think anyway. So congratulations on your new
He's a very handsome leech, and he treats me well.
Well, good.
That's good.
It's a good thing. He's going to listen to this, and it's not going to end well.
I'm
it's
very
be bad.
happy for you.
Well, as we lead in, there's nowhere to go but up. So please,
it can't get any worse, folks. This is it.
tell us your RYLA story.
All right, so my RYLA story. I was a camper in 2013, which was, like 6 years ago.
You looked at your watch.
I
Did your watch
I
have
don't
the
know
year
why.
on it?
No, it has the month and the day.
It's not a sundial.
I had to think about it.
You don't know that for
I have
sure,
no
Greg.
response for that other than yes. So I went to camp 6 years ago. Feels like forever. Long story short, I wasn't supposed to go to camp, and then found out like the day before camp that I was going, and I like freaked out because my older sister went back in the day, and I just saw what a transformation it did on the kind of person that she was. And I was just so pumped that I was going to get the same opportunity. And dude, I was not let down. I was just like floored by how everything that she told me was so true and so much more. Everyone was genuinely just the best kind of people. So kind, so welcoming, so encouraging, willing to connect with you on so many different levels. So I left camp super pumped, even more pumped than my already pumped state of self, and I was super honored to be selected to return the next year as an assistant activities counselor. So I wasn't in a cabin, rather helping with like the behind the stage stuff and all the crazy activities, which was awesome. I think a great fit for me, just because I love pumping people up, and I loved getting to like just be in everyone's face and to like, who is this chick with the hair? And it just like, that is I am here to just like pump you up and love on you. And so yeah. So I went as an ACC, and have returned every year since as on the activity staff, and it's been fantastic. I always like look forward to that time of year because it's just when I get to be awesome and crazy, and everyone values that, and I just get to be super positive and energetic, and it's great.
Well, and I, Josey, by all means, correct me if you think I'm wrong, but I find so when I returned to camp, I definitely got introduced to you. I think in the same way that everybody gets introduced to you, which is just a lot. But you have one of the most infectious personalities I think of anyone I've ever met.
Thank you.
Like, there are people who are high energy that I want. I'm like, no, okay, stop.
Yeah.
Now, could that's
I'm
fine.
just
Like, I want to like look through my fingers, but not with you. Like every time, and I think that's a credit to the way to your personality and the place of love that the passion comes from. That. It's like, it's infectious. I'm like, okay, you're pumped up, so that makes me want to be pumped up and things like that. And that's I think an important role to have at camp.
Yeah, and like Greg, I try to avoid the high, pumped up energy people. But you actually, and I feel like other people will say this, seek out whether I'm feeling down or up. You are a person that people want to be around.
You're gonna make me cry.
Okay, let's
get the mic wet.
Let's stop being so nice to her.
Okay,
So what's your deal now? Like, what do you do?
Oh gosh, so I get paid to be crazy, but not on Earth anymore. They put me in space now, and they put me in a uniform and gave me a microphone. It's a bad deal. So in lay terms, I am a flight attendant for Southwest Airlines, and I absolutely positively love it. I feel total freedom to be myself, to be crazy, to be fun, to be super kind, and sometimes like the most love I can give someone is not in your face, and it's not like jokes on the PA system. Like sometimes it's just like, hey, like, are you doing okay? I can see. I mean, I've come across people that are in tears coming on the plane, and like that's definitely like a different approach than sometimes what is just an obvious like outward expression of like happiness and stuff. Like sometimes like I just need to be on their level. But anyway, so it's an awesome opportunity to get to serve people in so many capacities.
How would you say that you use the stuff you learned from RYLA in your everyday life, be it in your new marriage or be it in the air,
right.
flying through in a metal tube through the air? How would you say you use the stuff you learned at RYLA?
Yeah, so from your list of words that I got to pick from, I think like my immediate draw was to pick something like super in your face, like energy or passion or something like that. But
it would have been on brand.
No, yeah, that would have been seen it coming a mile away. But I chose humility because I think that's something that is something that I for sure like have to work on and continually have to work on. Just like being aware. For example, like in my new marriage, like, and you're both married, so you know, like, life is not about you anymore. Your time is not about you. Your schedule is not about you. Your money is not about you. Even your own bed is not about you anymore. And so
when you put it like that.
And so it's just like this whole new way of like understanding how to serve someone. And again, going back to the point of like what's that look like? What's that level? Is it that like that really soft kindness, or is it a energy like you're down, like I need to pick you up, I need to make you laugh, I need to make you smile? And so it's so many different ways that looks. Now in my job, definitely humility is needed in plethoras. It is like the plethoras. I can't spell that, so don't ask me how.
We're just a presidential podcast.
Okay, so. Perfect, beautiful, awesome. So it is like the ultimate customer service job, because like these people pay a large amount of money to pay for the transportation to get somewhere, and that's totally understandable. But like the service like needs to be there. Like you always need to be calm, you always need to be welcoming, you always need to be like 100,000% like the best you. And so like sometimes that looks like getting people 6 drinks and in odd combinations, and it's like, you know, I'm just here to serve, I'm just here to love. And if that's a hug, if that's 6 drinks, like let me, like, how can I serve you? What's the best way to make this not about me? And I think camp taught me that really well, because I think just like who I am, it's really easy for me to be the person that's loves the spotlight, honestly, and like loves the attention and like loves to be loved by so many people. But I think like camp showed me that like I do have a loud voice, but sometimes like the quietest are like the most kind and most wise and most well-rounded. And so it just taught me to take a step back from maybe what comes really naturally, and just like, yeah, just be more chill, like be more in tune, for sure. And so for me, that looks like a lot of humility that I'm, again, continuing to try to work out in my life.
I do have a lot of job-related questions. We can't get to them all on this podcast, but to know like what route you're on to go from hugs to 6 drinks, I feel like that's enough.
Yeah, there's a lot. There's a lot that
happens.
Yeah.
But do you have any other questions before I ask the question?
Come on.
So as we invite people on this podcast, we invite them again to plug something, whether it's a book, movie, TV show, recipe, airline. Please feel free. This is your floor.
Oh gosh, this is a lot of pressure. I think what it would be, I make my own sound effects, by the way. I think what it would be is, so I graduated college a year ago and got married like pretty shortly after, and like started a new job and like moved away from home. So there was like a lot of change for me. I think like something that kept me like sane almost and kept me like who I am was like still being involved and still making time for something that I'm really passionate about. And so like for me, that's dancing. Like for me, that's like doing something, like getting out on the dance floor and acting a fool, but it being completely appropriate. So just kind of like camp. But so for like, I know like a lot of like high schoolers will be coming through like listening to this. I think that's something like important for them to hear, is like life's about to change really, really drastically, but don't lose like who you are. Like if that's reading, if that's hiking, if that's dancing, if that's puppet shows, I don't know, like do your thing, but stay, I don't know, like do something that you love, that is an art for you, I suppose.
So finally, Josey didn't have the courage to ask, but I will.
Okay.
About your job. Because your job is amazing.
Yes.
I have so many questions that we could go for hours and hours, but I just want to know, you fly a lot, and you understand the airline industry better than anybody. But we fly. I've been on a plane.
I have also been on a plane.
Yes. Oh. And I think a lot of people listening to this are interested in the inside scoop. Give us a hack. Give us an airline hack. Give us an air travel hack. Something that we don't know, that if we know now from you, the expert, that we will. A lot of pressure. I know.
Uncomfortable right now. While you're thinking of one, I'll have an example.
Okay.
Like the rolly suitcase bags. I know mine will fit in the overhead compartment. I don't need the desk lady telling me that it has to be checked. She hasn't even given me the chance to put it up there. So something like that.
Yeah.
Oh, y'all, there's I could just go on with little pieces of information.
That's all I need.
I don't know. I mean, I could just start rambling and you just tell me when to stop.
Go.
Done.
So as far as the luggage, maybe it will fit in the overhead bin space, but maybe they're anticipating a really full flight and they already have a lot of carry-on items. So even that they know that it's going to fit, they probably don't have room for it on board, especially depending on what configuration of aircraft it is. So if it's a 700, there's a lot less room than if it was on an 800 for a 737 Boeing. Let me think. Otherwise, middle seats are not the greatest. You always want the window, you want the aisle, but I think that's pretty obvious. No. I don't know. Oh my goodness. Okay. So I have this is a good one. This is solid. If you are traveling on an airplane, there's just a lot of cleanliness rules I don't think people understand. Do not, I repeat, do not go to the bathroom with your shoes off. It's I see that all of the time.
God.
It is not, guys, it is not water on the floor. I promise you. I've seen it all.
Okay.
If you're traveling, carry with you cleansing wipes, little wet ones. Wipe down your seat, your tray table. Wash your hands and then clean it with a little sandy wipe afterwards. Unfortunately, aircrafts are just not.
There's a lot of people
clean.
It's a lot of people in
Yes.
confined place. Okay.
Yes.
Can I just have the whole can of ginger ale if I ask?
Yes.
I can.
For Southwest, you can.
Yeah.
But I know other airlines are
But we're
not
not
as kind.
Yeah, but we're not going to.
No, we're not.
No, we're not going to mention
No.
them.
No.
Okay. Shelby Smith, this has been so wonderful. Thank you for being you, and thanks for being a guest on the podcast.
Absolutely. Thank
Ladies
you for
and
having
gentlemen,
me.
Shelby Smith, yay! And thanks once again to our very special guest, Shelby Smith, for being our guest here on the RYLACast. A ball of energy.
Always.
But as I mentioned to her, there are some people that when they have a lot of energy, it can be really overbearing, and it can be can you just you want to plug your ears or watch them through your fingers and things like that. And with her, she has that kind of infectious energy, where it just makes you want to be fired up. So I like Shelby; she's fun.
Yeah, agree.
Yeah,
Retweet.
I'm pro. Retweet with a comment. Comment or just an emoji, just
an emoji,
like the praying hands emoji.
Yeah, raising the roof. I don't know why I'm raising the literally raising the roof.
Oh, welcome to this podcast in 1997, and now with something to leave you with on the topic of humility, or maybe not. Maybe he's too humble to admit that he found something.
Ooh,
here he is, Josey.
Well, thank you, Greg. Yes, at risk of telling this story. I can't remember if I've told this story on the podcast, but again, a story about me, as always. In an episode about humility, what's more important than talking about me? But right out of college, I worked for the railroad, and I will always remember.
It's pronounced choo-choo.
Oh, choo-choo. I worked choo-choo, and I filled in for a manager after I had only been through the training program for about a year. And I remember we were at a railroad crossing in Rockwall, Texas. And
Texas.
This tamping gang, it's two guys, were essentially making the track straight at this railroad crossing. And these guys, each had been with the railroad for about 35 years. So there's a combined 70 years of experience. All they do day in and day out is sit on the machines and make railroads straight. Mm-hmm. And I remember we were getting close to needing to free up the track so they can run choo-choos on them.
Thank you.
And Jim, I came up and Jim was like, well, I think we're good to go. What do you think, boss? And I'm like, I'm 23 years old. Mm-hmm. I've been on this job a grand total of 5 days. And I said, I really don't know what I'm looking at. Jim, what do you think? And he paused, and not like the awkward pause where like waiting for me to say something. But he stopped, and I was like, well, is everything okay? And he goes, well, no one has ever asked me that before. And I thought about the gravity of that situation, that a guy had been doing his job for 35 years, and no one had ever turned around and said, what do you think about the job you just did? And it resulted in him saying, well, honestly, I'd like to do another pass. And I said, okay, well, then do another pass. And he said, well, we don't have the time to do that. And I was like, that's where, like you said, that's where the leadership aspect comes in. That's my job to worry about that as the manager.
Yes.
And so, I fought for the other pass. But that has always stuck with me, that idea that, and really, you're walking around, you don't know strangers what their expertise is, and this guy, he wasn't really banging the table for, hey, listen to me. Mm-hmm. He was just saying, hey, I'm done if you want me to be done, kind of thing.
Well, and there's twofold there. First and foremost, you're, and I'm not trying to kiss your butt here, but your deference to experience, I think, is key there. And the experience gap, I think, especially when you're younger, mm-hmm. it's very hard to navigate, because on one hand, you want to be taken seriously, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
Just because you're young should not be counted against you. But at the same time, it's also important to know that there are people who are going to know a lot more about you through more about the situation through no fault of your own.
Right.
Mm-hmm. That, in my line of work, which is significantly less important than yours, but in my line of work, there's this interesting balance between young writers and older writers. Older writers always want to give, I say always, I'm painting with a broad brush, but they want to give that, these young writers, they're whippersnappers, and they don't necessarily know what they're doing and things like that. People, you hear a lot of back in my days, right?
Right.
But young writers always think they're going to go out there and change the world. They're going to change the game. They're going to do things. And I had to find out probably 2 or 3 years later than I should have that, these older writers are not your enemy. These older people who do your job are assets to you. And if you can simply just tap into that, then you can improve yourself, even if you only take part of what they're doing. So I think that there's a humility in what you did as far as the deference to them and just saying, listen, you probably know a little bit more than I do. Not that I'm not smart, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
And that's I think another thing about humility, is that it does not necessarily have to be self-deprecation. Mm-hmm. I'm very good at self-deprecating jokes.
Not as good as I am.
But
that's
that's
weird.
Super meta. But to me, it doesn't necessarily have to mean that I'm not good enough.
Right.
It can just mean, I think you're better than I am at this. Why don't you take a stab at this? Mm-hmm. And so I think that the deference that you showed there is an important part of humility, especially in a leadership position. But that, at the same time, I doubt that guy respected you any less.
Right.
Right.
Well, and
maybe he did. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. He hated my guts.
Old Bill.
But I wrote down some words here. Fear, imposter syndrome. Like we talked about in previous episodes, and all of that stuff. As a young leader, was going through my head, and I imagine. If, it's going through a lot of people's heads of, if I say I don't know something, then I'm going to be walked over and just passed up on in whatever job they do or whatever activity. Mm-hmm. And so I think, you just have to accept that risk if I can I guess I'm just trying to pile on all the words and topics we've used in every podcast.
This is the final podcast, is what we're saying.
Into something to leave you with.
Big series finale.
But yeah, I guess the something to leave you with is just don't be afraid not to be the smartest person in the room. I mean, actually, if you're the smartest person in the room, you should find a bigger room.
Man, but just be sure that you are, man. Because there is there anything worse? And I freely recognize the irony of me saying this, but is there anything worse than somebody who thinks that they're the smartest person in the room and everyone else is looking around being like, this guy doesn't know what he's doing?
No.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, that's like, we've all had that boss. Mm-hmm. We've all had that boss who's just convinced that he's the smartest guy that's ever walked the earth. And that he's, but everyone is just like, jeez, I promise. But at the same time, like, I remember that boss for me. Mm-hmm. And I won't name check him, but I did have a boss like that I was like, man, I am 100% sure I could do your job better than you could.
Yeah.
But at the same time, going back to humility, right? Like, my job at that moment is not to one-up my boss. Mm-hmm. My job is to go out there and do my job and to do it the best that I can and hopefully get noticed in a way that will lead me to have his job one day. That was a former job, I should say. But I think that, like, there's, I don't know, humility just has a lot of tentacles with regards to that. And I was a young, hotshot journalism kid who was like, I'm so smart. I know what I'm doing. This old guy, this old fart doesn't know what he's doing. I don't know. Mm-hmm. I think a lot about that stuff.
Yeah. I think you're doing great.
Good podcast, man.
Good podcast.
That's going to do it for us. Thank you for spending a little bit of your day with us. Thank you so much to Shelby Smith for being our very special guest on the topic of humility. And please rate and subscribe rate and comment on the podcast wherever you get it. And here with an antiquated way to tell you how to tell other people about this podcast is Josey.
Yes, write it on a penny and put the penny on the railroad track so the train goes over it and flattens the penny into a real long word.
The choo-choo?
The choo-choo. I'll get it one of these days.
That's going to do it for us. Thank you for spending part of your day with us. And Josey, thanks for your courage.
Thanks, Greg.
We'll see you next time on the RYLACast.